we're now less than 2 weeks away from 10.1 releasing for Dragonflight, and with that comes a whole new season of Mythic Plus dungeons. We're going to have 8 new dungeons coming in, and the 8 current dungeons that we have are going to be, you know, put on the shelf, put on the back burner for now. So we're going to have 8 new dungeons coming through. 4 of those are going to be from Dragonflight themselves, so still new dungeons, and 4 are going to be from WoW's previous expansions. So we can kind of look into that a little bit, but also Blizzard is looking to do some dungeon tuning based on that, and we're going to have a few updates here as to, you know, how these dungeons are going to be shifting, how they're looking to rebalance some of them. Hopefully we don't get another Temple of Jade Serpent situation where the dungeon looks really nice, really calm, really peaceful, and then they release it and there's a nasty trash pack in the last... Well, they put like 2 or 3 trash packs in the last room, and all of them are nasty, all of them are deadly. So we'll be checking that out. We'll be looking, keeping a close eye on any of that. But the 4 dungeons that we're going to be getting in Dragonflight Season 2, we're going to have Brackenhide Hollow, Halls of Infusion, Neltharis, and Alderman. They're also going to be adding in Freehold, which is a big fan favorite, Underrot, which I think is a fantastic dungeon when you're not pugging, and then Vortex Pinnacle, which is a Cataclysm dungeon, very old, and Neltharian's Lair, which is from Legion. It probably makes sense. Neltharian's Lair, it's going to be 3 a.m. You queue up for a weekly. You're going to be thinking you're getting 1 Nelth. You're going to be getting a different Nelth. It could be a problem. But jokes aside, I think there's a good collection of dungeons that they're going to be bringing into the fold here for this one. We got some reasonably sized dungeons as well. A lot of trash and stuff. We're maybe able to pull big, which is what a lot of people like to do. But in terms of the changes, Brackenhide Hollow, I don't think really for me, like this Gastry, apparently the Warband, Heckler's Warband is quite dangerous. I've not actually been able to test this dungeon out yet. I do want to, but apparently this first boss is quite nasty with the way that the triple bosses work. I know THD was tweeting about how nasty it might look. I don't know if that's still the case. It looks like they're nerfing it slightly so that when you are blind and stumbling around from this decayed senses, maybe the boss isn't actually going to be hitting you as much, so maybe that means that people won't just get absolutely one-clapped, which is possibly the case there. In terms of Freehold, they are making quite a few changes. In fact, the majority of changes are coming into Freehold here. So the reason I was apprehensive about Freehold when it first was on the calendar for 10.1 is because Freehold is actually... It's a really good dungeon, really good weekly dungeon, good dungeon for like KSM and whatnot. As soon as you get to the real high echelons of Tyrannical, this dungeon is monstrous. The first boss, you used to have to use an LOS, like a line of sight mechanic, behind a pillar in order to not get one-shot by the boss. You have to have multiple DPS players do this, anyone in melee. Your range players had to constantly be standing at max range and baiting around the bird up in the sky. So it was this whole coordination thing, and then also you'd have to change positions periodically depending on the goop if your range messed up. So it was this whole coordination nightmare. Plus you needed to be a gnome, so you needed to use a gnome toy, which you can no longer use in Mythic Plus. So people were going to have to be using their recombobulators to become a gnome to then still like pillar hide. I don't know if that's going to be the case now still or not, but the way I see Sky Captain Crag is still quite dangerous. The powder shot is a 60-yard cone. Its impact damage has been reduced, but in an infinitely scaling, I don't know if this might still be the limiting factor. Hopefully it isn't, because it's something that you can't really avoid and it will hit a player at random. Maybe if they made it so it did reduced damage, but it did more damage if multiple people got hit, and then that was a way of like, as long as everyone stays spread, then you're okay, but if people stack, then you're doomed. Maybe that would be a good way to deal with this mechanic and still have it have high damage and one-shot potential, but only if you make a mistake, not just like you randomly get targeted and you die. And then they're making it so the Azerite Powder Shot can now be dispelled. So that's cool. That makes the fight a little bit easier. Council of Captains, so they're increasing, or I think they're increasing the crit strike damage. I'd have to double check. I can't remember if this was a 50% crit increase and now they're reducing it to 30%, or if this is actually going to be a buff there. But either way, you can get the buffs on the fight, and they're making it a tuning, they're tuning that. They're also now going to be affecting where the barrel is, who it's going to be targeting, so it's going to have a higher preference for DPS players than healers, than tanks as a last resort. So I guess if everyone else in the group is dead, which is cool, you don't want your healer getting barreled at awkward times, inopportune times. They're reducing the duration of the barrel smash, which was quite a nasty mechanic. It used to one-shot you if you weren't careful. They're reducing the duration of that to 2 seconds, but they're increasing the damage of it. So I think that makes sense. It probably should one-shot you on most difficulties at the higher level, but was a real big space denial because it lasted quite a few seconds, and you couldn't really go into that zone if you had to, you know, say move into position to deal with Eudora or something like that. So that's quite good. I think it was probably going to one-shot you anyway. Eudora's powder shot avoids shooting at the same player twice within 6 seconds, so this is kind of like the treatment that they gave to the third boss in Knockhood. So you can't get double quick shot. This is the same thing. If you get double shot here with the powder shot, you're just dead. You're just not going to have enough to survive it, really. I would imagine most of the time, because you just get double tapped, and you don't have time for your healer to heal you back up. The Grape Shot Leap will no longer jump to a location she's already standing at. This should maybe give you more time to adjust to where it's going to be, rather than her not really getting an animation of where she's moving, and then suddenly the mechanic comes out. That should probably be good, because it should give you more time to adjust to where she's going to be, because she has to go through the animation of the leap. I could see that being better. I could also see it be a bit worse. Eudora's Grape Shot now applies a stacking damage over time effect each time a player is hit. So impact damage has been reduced. So that's good that the impact damage has been reduced. Again, this was Eudora was one that basically, it was really hard to do this boss on Tyrannical. So I think that's good that they're reducing that a bit. Ring of Booty, they're making the sharks a little bit more easy to deal with, visually updating them to make them, I guess, look better. I remember they used to be really jank with their movement, which was really annoying. Because they didn't quite operate, well, they didn't quite react to where they should be positioned. You then have Holland Sweet is getting a little bit of like a rework here. He's going to be doing like a bleed effect dagger, which I think is quite nasty. That boss was already, I think, fairly hard enough, again, on some of the higher difficulties. Most of the time, though, you would just actually get one shot, so I guess a bleed effect isn't the end of the world. It probably just gives the healer a little bit more to do, because basically people will either get one shot, or there was no healing to do, so maybe this just gives healers a little bit more urgency, or agency. Urgency and agency. And then, yeah, a few other like minor little things. I guess they just kind of rework. Yeah, Swift Wind Saber now fires a single saber at a random player. It's then going to shoot 5 sabers in random directions. Okay, there was already a directional mechanic. I don't know if this is just going to look different, but it already kind of operated roughly like that anyway. I think it was shooting, I think it just always used to shoot 3, actually, and he'd spin around and shoot multiple. So I don't know if this is going to be more ideal or less ideal. They might be making it a little bit easier. And then Halls of Infusion, no longer, so the Tsunami no longer uses Rogue Wave. Stacks of Infusion now reset in between intermissions. So I'll be honest, I don't really know too much about Halls of Infusion and how much this is going to impact that. Alderman, the Trog Wave summoned are always made of 3 ambushes and 1 Geomancer. I know before you used to get quite a few Geomancers, if I'm not mistaken. You'd have just kind of mobs not being able to be stackable, so this might be a bit easier with that. And then the Sentinel Delandris with Unrelenting Damage bonus reduced to 5% per stack. That's decent, that's good. But Chronoloord Deos, I think, is the biggest deal. Reduce the damage of most abilities. This boss was trucking people on PTR, so this is good that they are nerfing this boss a little bit. And then Underwrought, many enemies have had their abilities updated and adjusted. Not quite sure exactly how that's going to look. I would love to do an updated video where I can cover some of this and show off some of these changes and how they are looking different, perhaps better. So I'm still thinking that there's probably going to be more dungeon tuning. I don't think that this is going to be everything. I think there probably is more tuning that needs to take place. But I think this is good, and I think generally speaking, hopefully the dungeon should be in a really good spot to go for 10.1. And then also wanted to turn you guys' attention to a change that they're making to gear trading. So they are increasing the time. So when you loot an item, you can trade it to somebody in your group or your raid team for 2 hours, right? But now they're increasing that to 4 hours. However, if you log off, the timer still ticks. Whereas before, it was a 2-hour timer, but if you logged off, it would just stay dormant and it wouldn't be ticking. They've changed that. So now it will. This is a massive impact, I think, for World First guilds. It does have a quality of life improvement for, I think, a lot of guilds, but it's very punishing at the top end, I feel. So the quality of life, and this is coming from Wowhead, and I think it's a good point, but the quality of life is that most raid guilds, they want to be optimizing their raid loot trading, right? And you want to make sure that loot is going to the right people, but you don't know really all of the loot that's going to drop each night. So how do you optimize that if you don't know what's going to necessarily be dropping? Most people would loot something and then leave it in their bags, and then at the end of the night they can trade the loot around. However, most people raid between 3 and 4 hours per raid night. you could only trade for a max of 2 hours. So it did make it quite awkward with wanting to trade loot maybe between the second or third boss and then the last boss, especially when you're progging bosses as well, right? So that could be quite awkward. Now with it increasing to 4 hours, that's quite good, because now this should cover most raiding guild setups. So that means that most people can loot something early in the evening and then trade it later on, and that's quite good. I think that's a good deal. That's a good situation. It also is going to prevent any kind of like vault shenanigans where you hold items and then wait and see what your vault is the next day before you then trade off. Say you raid on like a Tuesday and you're on EU, and then your reset's going to be on Wednesday. Well, then you could loot something on the Tuesday, hold it, wait and see if you get the trinket in your vault, and then, oh no, I didn't get it. Okay, cool, I'll keep this. Or yeah, I did. Okay, I'll trade it off. It's going to stop that. Which, I guess it prevents a little bit of min-maxing, but I think for most people, they're just like, bro, I just want to loot an item, and I just want to equip it, and that's it. I just want to loot the item, and I want to equip it. I think for most people, yeah, okay, they can't min-max as much now with this, but it's probably going to just be a nice quality of life where they can go like, oh, well, I couldn't trade it, so I can't be angry about it. For top-end guilds, this is going to be awful, though. I've already seen Scripe tweeting out about it. I think some other individuals as well. What top-end guilds would do, especially for the Race World First, is they would have characters that would go into the raid, they'd loot things, and they'd put all of the loot onto this one character, and then have that character log out. And then when they did split after split after split after split, they knew who they could trade what gear to, and what gear dropped. It basically showed them what gear they were going to have available, so that then they could make the decision of where that loot was going to go. By doing this 4-hour window, I think that's going to make it a lot trickier for these guilds to either be way more efficient with splits. So, like, from the first moment a split starts to the end, they'd have to, like, go, try and get 3-4 splits in or something within that time, and then be able to trade loot quicker. But I don't really know, in the grand scheme, I mean, Race World First guilds are really good. They've got, they've got analysts and stuff to come up with good ideas of how to deal with this. They've got mathematicians and stuff. I'm sure they'll figure out a way to optimize this. But it definitely throws a spanner in the works for Race World First guilds. I'm a little bit unsure on this one. I mean, it doesn't really affect me as a mainly, Mythic Plus kind of guy. But it's definitely a funny one for guilds and higher end players. I am worried to see how this is going to impact them. But let me know your thoughts on this video. What do you think about the changes to, the dungeon tunings? Anything still outstanding that needs to be changed? What do you think about this quality of, like, gear trading time limit? I think it's going to be pretty funny to watch. But, yeah, thank you so much for watching, and take care. See you in the next one.